God of this world now? Satan is, right? And the reason is because Adam turned around and took what he had. God said, it's all yours. Do what you want with it. It's yours. I'm here to come down and visit with you every day in the cool evening and just hang out. But do what you want. So what Adam did, he gave it to Satan. So because of that, we have to live according to Satan's rules. But God made a way out, right?
Yep.
So that's the good thing about it. We know that it says in 2 Corinthians 4:4, it says, Satan, who is the God of this world, has blinded the minds of those who do not believe. They are unable to see the glorious light of the good news. They don't understand this message about the glory of Christ, who is the exact likeness of God. You know, we talk about so many times that Jesus came to show us God. If we want to know what God's, you know, how many times people pray, oh God, if it's your will. Well, you know, in most things, we can know what God's will is because Jesus showed us the Father. That's what's so exciting to me about faith, is we walk with Christ, and most of the time we can know what his will is because we see what Jesus did. And that's exciting to me. That's why God sent Jesus here. Well, when Adam gave that authority over to Lucifer, to Satan, it was almost like it was a legal thing. He legally gave that authority to Satan. And so then, like I say, man had to live according to the rules that Satan had set up. Well, Satan's the God of this world, and Adam gave that accountability away. But it says in Romans 7, 9, and 10, it says at one time, Paul's talking about when he was born, he wasn't subject to sin. But he came to a certain age in his life, we call the age of accountability, that he did become subject to sin. The Mormons actually teach that at 8 years old, that's when a child reaches the age of accountability. Well, it's kind of silly to say that everybody reaches that at the same time. I mean, you have some people that maybe are mentally impaired or whatever that may never reach the age of accountability, that they're never held accountable for their sins. But I remember reading this in Romans before I really understood. I thought, man, this doesn't make any sense to me. Matter of fact, Romans, if you read the King James, to me, it's still kind of a hard book to understand, just the way it's all written. But if you get like a New Living Translation or something like that, it makes much more sense. But it says in Romans 7, 9, and 10, in the New Living, it says, and at one time, Paul's talking, I lived without understanding the law. Before the law came, I was alive. In other words, to God. And he says, but when I learned the command not to covet, for instance, the power of sin came to life, and I died. So I discovered that the law's commands, which were supposed to bring life, brought spiritual death instead. Well, Paul didn't die physically, did he? But what is death? Death is just a separation. That's all it ever is. It's never, ever, ever ceasing to exist. So the world doesn't know that. The world thinks when you die, it's because you're just dead. You're in the grave. We die physically, our spirit and our soul. The spirit, which is the real us, our soul, which is our mind, our will, and our intellect, we're separated from our bodies. Well, if we go through that second death, that's being separated from God forever. Well, that's what Lucifer wanted. That's what Satan wanted, was for us, when we leave this earth, to be completely separated with God and to never, ever be able to come back to him. Like I said, the age of accountability can be any age. I mean, I can't remember when I started really knowing right from wrong, but I know I gave my life to the Lord at 13. The Lord convicted me of my sins, and I knew I had to change. So we all go through that at some point. Without God making a way for us out of that, we would have been separated from God. So, and that's all because of what Adam did. Before Jesus, there was no grace. Now, if you look in the Old Testament, you'll see examples. You'll see types and shadows that God gave Moses grace when he could go into the Holy of Holies. And even though he wasn't a priest and he wasn't the high priest, he could still go into the Holy of Holies at any time and sit on the mercy seat. Well, he should have been struck dead, right? Because he wasn't a high priest, and he sinned. I mean, he did not live a perfect life like the high priest was supposed to. So every time he went in there to talk to the Lord, he should have been struck dead. Well, you look at David. David had grace with the Lord. I mean, I look at David's life, and what a guy. I mean, I like him as an example for my life. Because it says he was a man after God's own heart. And you know that David, of course, he did the thing with Bathsheba. We all hear about that. We always hear these bad things. And then he did the census thing. We still don't know exactly why. The Bible never really tells us why that was such a bad thing. But God was really upset with David because he took a census of God's people. You know, why I like to relate that to the church is so many churches are like, oh man, we had 14,000 last week. You know, and some of them are like, oh man, we only had 35 last week. You know what? The guy with that many and the guy with that few should not be worrying about how many people they had. I'm not going to worry that I've got, 5, 7, 8 people in here tonight. 8 people. God gave me what I need tonight. So that's all we got to do is be faithful to what God brings us, right? So anyway, David, some reason, took this census
said, you number these soldiers here, there, too, so he did it himself, so
Yeah.
I don't understand.
I don't either. You do see that. See, God says, I want this many in this tribe doing this, so we meant this many in this tribe. So yeah, I don't know.
20 years and up, you know, yeah.
I've read commentary after commentary for years trying to figure out what was so bad about that. I don't know. But when we get to heaven, we'll know. Another thing that David did, which was not really a sin, like, we talk about, like, in Utah, it's a big topic, is polygamy. Polygamy in the Bible is not really a sin, but it's not God's best either. It is not God's best. You see, most all of the patriarchs had more than one wife, which, how in the world they did that, I'll never know. But, and how the wives put up with it. I mean, really.
They were all like,
Yeah, yeah. That's right, Larry. I agree, Larry. I love you, baby. We have a couch I can borrow tonight. But one of the things David did, not just the polygamy thing, but one of the things he did too, he wanted to build a temple for the Lord. He said, it's not right for me to live in this beautiful palace and all this stuff, and for the house of the Lord to be in disrepair and all this stuff. So he wanted to build a temple, but God came and said, no. He said, you cannot build a temple because you killed too many people. Well, you know, it's okay. We talked about the Bible says thou shalt not commit murder. But when somebody has to go to war, I mean, that's okay. God doesn't hold you responsible. You're doing what you have to do. But in David's case, he had a bloodlust almost. If you read, matter of fact, what was a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, when I challenged everybody to read all the way through the Bible, reading back through it again, it's like, man, sometimes it's just hard to read because you see all the people being slaughtered and killed. And I think people that do that get to a point they kind of like that. Now, you tell me, Ed, you've been in the military, and you're a sniper, so did you ever feel that way? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but did you know people like that?
Well, I think the biggest thing people, you either deal with it or you don't deal with it. And the biggest thing is if a colleague or a friend of yours gets killed and you say, well, why not me?
Yeah.
A lot of guys come out with that and they can't deal with it, and that's why we have 22 vets a day committing suicide today. But they saw a lot of bad things.
Sure.
I mean, the war is not fun.
Oh, yeah.
It's glamorized. I tell you, I'm doing a study right now on the Civil War, and actually the beginning of the U.S. all the way up through to the Civil War, and now I'm into the Civil War. It just makes me sick.
Yeah.
I cry, and my heart cries because of the senseless slaughters that went on a daily basis. You know, and I thought about, we're having a senseless slaughter right now of Christians, and I don't hear anybody saying anything. I mean, last night I think Reverend Billy Graham's son, Franklin Graham, he said a little something about it last night, and there's a guy out in Texas, he'll say a little something about it. But, you know, where are the people? I'm telling you, it's a sad situation. Because we all hear the numbers, but if you've never seen those numbers,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's just like the
it's a different
Nazis
situation.
and the Jews.
Well, that's happening again in Europe right now.
The
There's a
other
rabbi.
people were blind, they just thought, rumors, they didn't really believe it. But now we have the TV,
That's right. There's a rabbi right now in Belgium, I believe. He's urging his congregation to go to either Israel or America because it's another Hitler. It's getting real bad there.
Yeah. Well, the other day they found a mass grave in Iraq
Yeah.
of Iraqi soldiers that ISIS had killed 1,700. I mean, that's more than half the people who grew up in my hometown. And, I mean, they ought to be, the whole world ought to be saying, whoa, because they're Muslims killing Muslims, of all things.
Wrong
But
president.
You
it's
know
just-
what
it's
upsets me is, young people trying to get over there to fight with the ISIS,
Oh, big time. In
We
Europe
really-
especially because they infiltrated there big time, but they're starting to take over here too.
Well, they're trying to
get out there and start swearing and saying all sorts of things like that, you know, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But if you go to a movie, you hear all those words and
F words.
things, you know, and that changes the whole concept of it, you know, like it's a macho kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not a macho, it's nothing glorious, not glamorous about it.
Go ahead.
I dated a Green Beret when I was in undergraduate school, and it was the most difficult experience I had because he had so many flashbacks, and he had shrapnel in his neck. And he gave me two things, and he said, I don't want these two things. One was this Green Beret, which I still have, and the second I couldn't keep. It was a Gideon New Testament with a bullet hole in it that he had had in his left pocket that saved his life. Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it? You know, you talk about religion, it was a bad one.
The little Gideon Bibles used to be standard issue. We used to get a standard issue Bible with every sea bag or every time you got your gear. You got two Bibles, one for your breast pocket and one for your locker so you could read it at night. The one for the breast pocket, that's so it would all absorb into your heart. I mean, that's what we were taught. You know, put it next to your heart and it'll stay there and protect you. And then you hear stories like this where, you know, that is all.
My brother was in Vietnam, and to this day, he doesn't go see war pictures. He said, why relive it? And one of the things he told me, that I just can't imagine having to do this, but he said he had to be quiet from the enemy, but the soldier next to him had his guts and all spread out, and my brother had to crawl through it low on the ground to get to the other side. I mean, there's
Yeah, we
just
have no idea.
horrible things like that. He won't talk about, that's the worst thing he told me.
Yeah, and I'm sure things people can't do. I've been reading some books and watching some movies on World War I fighter pilots. And they said the little airplanes made of wood and canvas and some wire. And they're shooting 30 caliber, 8mm bullets out of them, big old bullets, you know. And one guy came in, landed one day, and their life expectancy was 2 weeks. I mean, that's how many were being slaughtered. And when I landed, they counted 270 bullet holes in his airplane, and he lived through it. And he didn't have any protection whatsoever. I mean, now you've got some, like a titanium bathtub, you said, kind of protection, bulletproof glass. But it's just amazing. Those guys would line up one after another. They couldn't wait, you know. And like this gas attacks they had in World War I, just amazing. They showed 60 Minutes last week. I told Barbara I didn't want her to watch it, but they showed when the leader over there, whatever his name is, they actually bombed their own people in a subdivision that had turned against him, bombed them with sarin gas. And I've never seen people suffer like that. I mean, it was, and I'm sure they showed just the basic, easy stuff on TV, but it was awful, awful. Well, that's what we have as the devil, isn't it? That's what the devil wants us to do. The Bible says that wars and rumors of war are gonna happen until Christ comes back, which I'm telling you, Jesus is coming back soon. Everything is happening so fast. So every biblical prophecy that has to be fulfilled is fulfilled. And if you listen to Jack Van Impe, he says there's 500 prophecies that have all been, and I'm not sure which they are, but there's 500 of them that have all been fulfilled.
The last two, Israel become a state and the war of 67.
Yep.
If you pick up this that I just did, our prayer needs for this church, there's a whole column of military personnel we're supposed to pray for.
Good.
And every week I read through it to find out where they are. And it's kind of, and to see which branch they're in.
Yeah.
But it's amazing where we've got them, all over the world,
Yeah.
representing
I'm glad they have them.
First Baptist of Atlanta. Yes.
John Hagee, he was speaking over in Jerusalem, and you could actually see
See the
bombs
bombs. Yep,
going off
yep.
behind
As you speak,
him.
the bombs are going, I saw it.
Yes. And he calls it that, he says all the other countries like Russia and Libyan,
Ezekiel 38.
Libya, and all those countries are attacking, are going after Israel. And he believes it's gonna be Magog.
That's Moscow. Magog is Moscow. It's all Russian down, but also Persia, which is Iran. They're gonna get, it's all, Ezekiel 38, it's phenomenal.
That's when the Antichrist will come in power. Israel's going to be surrounded.
As we speak, it's
And that's when here comes the second coming. Of course, the church is going to be taken out of the way first, I believe.
Did God say don't touch Israel?
Oh, absolutely. So whoever blesses Abraham will be blessed, whoever curses Abraham will be blessed.
We're supposed to pray for Israel
I
too.
do. I remember.
Yeah. So anyway, going back to this, we have to realize that God sent Jesus to pay the price for everything that Adam messed up. Well, and the way that Jesus Jesus had to pay the price completely as a man. 1 John 4:2 says, this is how we know if they have the Spirit of God. If a person claiming to be a prophet acknowledges that Jesus Christ came in a real body, and that person has the Spirit of God. 2 John 1:7 says, I say this because many deceivers have gone out into the world. They deny that Jesus Christ came in a real body. Such a person is a deceiver and an antichrist. They had what they called the Gnostics back then. They kind of believed everything was just kind of like it was kind of shadowy and nothing was really real and all this stuff. But what John's telling us, Jesus came as a man completely. He had to. He had to pay for all those sins by living a life without sin and then dying and taking on this stuff. So how in the world God would take off his deity or being God and lay it aside like a cloak, we're never going to understand that until we get to be with him. We'll never know how. Even then, I don't know if we're going to understand it. But that's what he did. He did. And like I said, death is never ceasing to exist. It's always a separation. We ask another question, is there anything that God can't do? Well, a lot of things God can't do. God can't lie. God cannot look at sin. That's why when Jesus was on the cross, when he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Because he had not only taken on sin, he became sin. And so God had to turn around and he could not even look at him. And you know what? None of us on this earth have ever experienced that. We've always had the ability to turn and cry out to God because he's always been right here ready for us if we wanted to. But Jesus couldn't do that at that point because he had become sin.
My old pastor said that when you get to heaven, you're still learning
Oh, I think so too.
as you go.
Yeah.
It's a journey, even when you get there, I guess. I don't know, I'm not a writer, but I'm trying to learn.
Heard one guy say one time, the reason we're going to be with God forever in heaven is because we'll never quit learning. I believe that.
To learn firsthand experiences.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what? We're going to operate by faith there, I believe too. I mean, you know, God wants us to, faith is what pleases him. And he wants us to operate by faith here. But when we get to heaven, we're going to
On
operate by
earth
faith.
as it is in heaven.
What's that?
On earth as it is in heaven.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, we find out though that God gave man free will, right? You know, there's some beliefs that God didn't, there's some people are destined to go to heaven when they're put here, some are destined to go to hell. I don't believe that. This church doesn't go for that either. And I will not ever believe by knowing God's spirit, the way God is, that he would purposely put people on earth to go to hell. Now, God, that is not what God would do. Now, there are people that turn. Pharaoh, if you look at him, says he hardened his heart, so God hardened his heart even more because he turned from God. I mean, he had that ability to turn to God and to be righteous with God, but he did not do that. So, not only did God give men free will, he also gave angels free will. They still have free will. If you read in Genesis or Revelation chapter 12, a third of the angels are going to fall in the future. Now, you talk about things getting bad, when angels start falling, that's when it's not going to be a good place to be on this earth, because I think we'll be with him at that time.
I hope it's not my angel.
Oh, you're not kidding? You're not kidding?
One watching over me.
You look at it and think, how in the world could an angel that's in God's glory all the time, how could they be so stupid? Like
I thought
Lucifer.
angels are supposed to protect us.
That they are. There's different kinds of angels, but yeah, we do have
Satan has
guardian angels.
angels too.
Right.
Oh,
Satan.
But,
Yes.
but how could they, I mean, I can see as a
Know
people,
what they know. Yeah.
right, because we don't see God's glory all the time. And when we're not saved, we're blinded to that. But the angels see it all the time. And like Satan, I mean, God had put him as Lucifer over this earth. He ruled this earth, and yet he still fell away with all the other angels. A lot of preachers say a third of the angels fell in. That's not biblical. If you go, they're taking that scripture out of Revelation, which is a future event where a third are going to fall. There were some that fell, but there may have been more than a third. We don't know. There may have been less. But they fell. So they have a free will too.
How can you, seeing God's glory?
Yeah.
I
It
don't
just
know.
blows my mind. It's like
I don't understand it either. I mean, I guess that's how much the deception is.
So nice.
amazing.
In Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, we see the earth, but it's destroyed. It says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, God created the heavens and the earth. Verse 2 says, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, or the deep flooded waters. Well, when God first created this earth, here's what happened. Isaiah talks about it. He says, for the Lord is God, and he created the heavens and the earth, and put everything in place. He made the world to be lived in, or to be inhabited, like the King James says, not to be a place of empty chaos. He didn't create it to be an empty chaos. He said, I am the Lord, he says, and there is no other. God cannot create anything in a destructive form. He cannot create something that's destroyed or that's just worse and worthless. God can't do that. That's one of the things he can't do. So we see in verse 2 of Genesis Genesis chapter 1, here's the earth, and he created it, but it's destroyed. Well, we talked about this before, how in verse 1, everything was perfect. And you have to go back and dig through the Bible to find out how he would created Lucifer, this perfect angel, and put him over the earth. And it says the earth was inhabited. We see this from other scriptures. There were cities, there were highways, there were people, there were even sanctuaries or palaces. And don't tell them what it is. I mean, there may have been cars back then, there may have been airplanes, we don't know. Matter of fact, I think there was probably a whole lot more than what we think about back then.
Fred Flintstone.
Huh?
Fred Flintstone.
Yeah, that's right. Puddle in your car. But there was so much, and it was all destroyed, and it was all just, earth was a destroyed mass. Well, God gave Jeremiah a picture of that, and he had this vision, and he said, Jeremiah 4:23-28, he said, I looked at the earth, now this is when it had been destroyed after Lucifer had sinned, and it was empty and formless, just like it says in Genesis 1:2. I looked at the heavens, and there was no light. Now remember, in Noah's flood, there was still light, right? So in this flood, this is a different flood, there was no light. He says, I looked at the mountains and hills, and they trembled and shook. We talked about how that flood, everything was a mass of just swirling nonsense on the earth. And it says, I looked, and all the people were gone. Well, in Noah's flood, there were still 8 people, right? And then he goes on to say, all the birds in the sky had flown away. Well, we know that Noah had birds, right? And he says in verse 25, I looked, and the fertile fields had become a wilderness. The towns lay in ruins, crushed by the Lord's fierce anger. And it says, this is what the Lord says, the whole earth, the whole land will be ruined, but I will not destroy it completely. Remember in verse 2, there's still the earth there, but it's all just a mass of chaos. The earth will mourn, and the heavens will be draped in black because of my decree against my people. I have made up my mind, and I will not change it. Well, that first earth we see was just pitch black. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. Well, in Noah's flood, there was still light. The sun still shined, and there was night and day. So this is a completely different flood that Jeremiah saw. Well, in Allen, Texas, I told you last week about the biggest 24-hour rainfall in the United States was in Allen, Texas, where I lived when I was working right when I got out of the ministry, actually, I was working for Amoco Oil Company. Found an article today, and it said Allen, Texas was deluged by 43 inches of rain in 24 hours. It was from July 24th to July 25th, 1979, setting an all-time record 24-hour rainfall for the U.S. And when you figure you take an inch of rain, you have a little tube out on a thing, that's that much rain. Well, that means the whole area was covered with 43 inches of rain. And that was in a 24-hour period. Well, let me finish the article. It says the torrential rain fell as tropical storm Claudette made landfall near the Texas-Louisiana border before stalling right over Allen. The 24-hour rainfall in Allen may also be the record for the world's greatest 24-hour rainfall occurring over flat terrain, according to the Atlantic Hurricane Season Summary of 1979, released by the National Hurricane Center.
What year was that?
I'm sorry?
What year was that?
79.
79.
Yeah. And when I lived there, they said every house in the town was flooded, had water up over the floors. The one I lived in, we had leased this house, and it had wooden floors in it, but it had carpet. Those floors would squeak and creak like you wouldn't believe because they'd all been warped and stuff. But I was doing a little calculating. 43 inches of rain, like I say, you take any kind of bucket, that's 43 inches, no matter how big the area is you're catching. In a 40-day period, 24 hours and 40 days, it'd be 1,720 inches of rain. That means 143 feet of water above your head. That's how much that would be if it rained. And I asked some people who lived there then, I said, what was it like? Was it just like knock you down, you couldn't see it? He said, no, it was just like this, it was a hard rain, but it just never quit. It just never let up. So you figure 143 feet of rain everywhere, that's amazing, isn't it? And not only did Noah have the rain coming, but also the ground, all the subterranean waters came up. And I showed you this video last week to kind of show maybe where that might have come from. And if you believe that compressed earth theory, the earth was smaller and all the continents were together. And then as it started growing, it started releasing all that. I saw a video yesterday too about gold, or it's a movie actually, documentary, about where gold comes from and the way people go crazy over gold and get gold fever and all this. But they said the way that gold was released, it's in the magma of the earth. The way it's released is when the earth was separated, and they were showing the same thing. And I'd never heard this before, the expanding earth theory. But they said it would come up through fountains and stuff that would burst forth, and that's why we find gold on the surface tons of mining. Matter of fact, if you go to the West Desert, out west of Utah, Salt Lake City, there's miles and miles and miles of underground mines. They average a half mile deep. And I was, natural mines, people that they dug out. I mean, back in the 1800s mostly. And up till World War II is when they mined. And when World War II started, gold was an essential mineral, so they wouldn't let them really dig for it much anymore. So all the gold mines pretty much stopped right then. But I found that I would always see them, you know, we'd go back on the west side of Salt Lake City and on the back of the mountain, you see these openings. And they always dug them in an arch shape because that's the strongest structure we had. But the problem was most of them were about 5'8", 5'10", so I always had to bend like this, I had to bump my head. But I was always afraid to go in them too because they'd find like dynamite that had been left in. It was real dangerous now, and it's all soaked out, the nitroglycerin, you just touch it, explode. Then also they would follow the quartz veins. If you see quartz, gold runs with quartz, and that's what would come up with the magma and stuff. So what these guys would do is they'd find like there was one place I've never seen this big thing of quartz sticking up out of the ground, this boulder, and they would see something like that, so they would start digging, and they would do what they call a single jack, which is just an iron rod with a T-looking thing on the end, and they would hammer that and turn it, and then they'd stuff the dynamite down in that hole, go out, blow it up, then go out. They'd run a lot of times rail tracks out and run their ore cars and all out to get the ore out. Well, they might be digging straight for 2 miles, and all of a sudden the quartz vein goes like this, so they go straight down. And like I said, the average depth was 24 or half a mile deep. And so anytime I went in, I was always kind of afraid because you never know if there's gonna be bad air or if you're gonna go. A lot of times they'd be digging, there'd be a thing go down, so they'd dig down, but they'd keep digging straight too. When they reached the end down here, they'd throw some old timbers over it, some old logs, and then cover them with dirt. Well, 120 years later, they're rotten. And people walked in those things and fallen in, some to their death because they've fallen so far. One guy lived in a little town on the west side of Salt Lake City, and they have mines all over the mountain. He had lived in this house 30 years. He walked out one day, and there was a 20-foot diameter hole in his backyard. It was 30 foot deep. That's enough to kill you. And he said, I had no idea, but it was one of those things they had dug a mine, and then they just threw timbers over it. Well, you never do their timbers or anything. So you had to be a little careful. I did find a video a few months ago that some guys found out where I used to hang out all the time. They found an entry, and they went in this thing. And I mean, they walked for miles and miles and miles back under the ground. It was amazing. And all the wood they put in there to shore these things up, it's just amazing how much these guys did without all the modern technology we have now. So anyway, back to Adam and Satan and all that. Adam gave away the authority of this earth. So Lucifer became the god of this world. Well, God uses men to do things. The Bible, God could have built the ark, gave it to Noah. He could have written the Bible and just thrown it to us. But God uses people. God wants people to get involved, that people have faith and walk with Him. So we have my son, like I said, I had a good talk with him not a good talk, but I talked to him the other day. And he says, I just can't believe it. I don't get inspired by the Bible at all. He says, that's just a bunch of stories men have written. Well, if you go back there and look over, I forget how long a period, almost 2,000 years, 66 different books, I forget how many authors, nobody, no man could ever make something like this. There's just absolutely no way. Pastor David always says the Bible's the only book that when you start reading it, the author shows up. I love that. And I told my son, that's the only book that's alive in the whole universe. It's the only book that's living and breathing. And I said, if you come to know the Lord, I promise you it'll mean a whole lot more to you. God will begin to speak the word to you. Another thing about the Bible, if you want to know how the Bible came about, if you go to my website, jmac.com, it's JAYMC.com. If you go to my Christian Answer page, you'll see on there, there's a thing about the Bible. How did we get our modern day Bible? Really interesting. It's from the Dake Study Bible. It's where I got the information, got their approval to put it on there. It's amazing how we got our modern day Bible, how it came down to what we have. And it really is a godly thing.
You know, another thing that's amazing when we talk about the Bible is that all the characters in the Bible, take for instance Joseph, he had to go through a storm, but God used him in the end.
Yep.
I mean, his brothers cast him away and tried to kill him and all this. And then you look at David, he had, even though God chose him, he had to hide in caves and everything. He feared for his life.
Yep.
I mean, he cried out to God. You think about people today that are facing cancer, and it can be any kind of storm. It could be financial, and
so focused on the banner, but then even Pastor David said one time, you gotta focus on the Lord, it's already been done.
Yep.
So, you know, I'm trying to learn, I'm not a rocker or anything, but I'm trying to learn, like, even though I've gone through things, like I'm trying to learn to rest in the Lord, even though it's things going on. And I notice when I kind of rest and chill, and rest in the Lord, that my husband's more better, my kids are more better. But when I get crazy, when I was younger, I had a temper, and I'd scream at them all, and, you know, I'd be after them, you know, you better do this, and now I just back off, and I just go, all right, Lord,
It's nice.
it's in your hands, I say it's in your hands now, but it took me a lot of years to get there.
When you think about it, what's the worst thing that happen? We lose our life.
That's right.
What happens? We go be with the Lord, so that's not really that bad a deal.
That's a good thing, really.
But what I'm trying to say through all this is all of God uses men and everything. God wants to use you. There's some reason God has you, and I don't know what that is. But I don't know if any of you ever heard of a guy named Lester Sumrall, but real man of God. I just love this guy. Well, they brought him to where I went to seminary, and they didn't want to stop our classes. What they did, they just cut like 10 minutes off each of our classes, and had him do his thing at the end of each day. And it was so funny because our last class, this guy named Doug Jones, who you'd have to know Doug Jones, he's kind of corny, kind of goofy, and kind of a big lurchy kind of guy, but just a man anointed by the Holy Spirit. And he was a lot of fun. But he would start, I forget what class we had, but he would get completely off the topic and start teaching something else. He said, the Holy Spirit's just leading me this way. Well, we would leave his class, go in to hear Lester Sumrall. Lester Sumrall would take up right off where he left. It was just amazing. All week long that happened. And this guy was a real man of God. But he was one day, he was teaching Lester Sumrall. He said, you know, a lot of you here are worried to death about if you're walking in God's will or not walking in God's will or what you're going to do. Of course, you saw that all the time. You know, what am I going to do when I get out of school? You know, I should be doing this, doing that. He said, 90% of you people here are walking in God's will right now. And I thought, no way. Because there were so many people who would come to school out there and then just stay there and not go do anything in the ministry. And it's like one guy said one time, if you're working at a Circle K here or 7-Eleven and coming to here all the time, you graduate school, go help some pastor that's trying to start a church and we're working a 7-Eleven there. I mean, because the pastors could use the help, you know. But he said 90% of you guys are walking in God's will. And he said, unless God's called you to do something specific, just do what you're doing. Just keep doing what you're doing. He said, if God wants you to know, he'll tell you what he wants you to do. But one of the other things I want to talk about is God's promises. All of God's promises are conditional. Every one of them. And somebody else say, well, wait a minute, I thought faith was free. Faith is free. Salvation is free. But Romans 10:9 and 10 says, if you confess with your mouth, and if that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is by believing in your heart that you're made right with God, and it is by confessing with your mouth that you're saved. So our condition to be saved is to believe in our heart and confess with our mouth. All of God's conditions, or all his promises are conditional. And we need to realize, how do we know what they are? By getting in the Word of God. There's no substitute for reading God's Word. And if you were to do a survey of Christians, how many seriously read the Word of God every day? I think you'd be shocked at how few people really read it. That's why we don't know what God's will is. Like I said, Jesus is the perfect picture of God. We can know God's will by seeing Jesus. What did Jesus do when he was here? The Bible says he healed all who were oppressed of the devil. So that tells you right now that anybody oppressed the devil today, Jesus wants to heal them. That's his will. He healed all those that were sick. Every time they brought him somebody sick, what did he do? He healed them. So his will is to heal today. We don't have to say, well, God, if it's your will, we need to know what God's will is, and we can. Amen. So anyway, we're going to finish there. Next week, we're going to talk about Noah and the family coming off the ark. What happened then? There were quite a few things that happened. And we're going to see where all the people on this earth actually came through Noah, right? And they came through one of his 3 sons. So we're going to talk about which son, started this race of people, and there's three races. There's the Mongoloid, which is the Indian, the Asian, those. There's the Caucasoid, the whites, and there's the Negroid, which are the black people. And so all of us came from those 3 basic groups, and of course some have mixed through the years and all that. But we're going to talk about all that, how everybody came through those 3 groups. We're going to talk about where all Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the sons, where they went, after that flood, and they set up and started having children. We'll talk about that. And if God allows me to, we'll talk about the curse of Canaan. It's not one that, unless God allows me to do it, I'm not going to talk about it, because I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And it's just, if you want to know, you can come talk to me. I can tell you privately. It's one of those things that sometimes you have to maybe just not talk about. So anyway, it's not meant to hurt people's feelings. It's just true. Sometimes people don't like God's word. So
so much nicer. And I think we ended up in his, eventually we ended up in the classroom where he was in. But then we sat next, God had this guy sit next to us, and he had a Bible, and he looked like a teacher. So I asked him if he was a teacher, and he said yes. And so we started going that life group. But the person I think of the most, that impressed me the most, was that usher.
That's cool.
He always, and his wife was very, very sick. I don't remember what she had, but it was some kind of form of disease, but he never complained,
Praising
always had a
his
smile.
Serving God and praising God even in this.
Isn't that amazing how his position may seem so
It was
small,
so,
to some people, but it's so big to others.
Amen.
It's
And that's something you guys, you may feel like what you're doing is a big deal. And you send cards all the
And
time.
when he wasn't
That means
there,
a
we
lot.
really missed him, because if somebody else was in his place,
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, so don't ever minimize what God's doing in your life. Just don't do that.
Reading the book of Joshua last week, and into Judges now, but what you just said about Canaan, God specifically said, because you didn't get them all out of Jerusalem, they're always going to be a problem. Because you didn't completely get them out of here, they're always going to be a problem, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Now it's happening in this country.
Look at Abraham, because his sin was with sleeping with
Sarah.
I sat on the bench here in this.
Sarah.
I'm sorry.
Hagar. Yeah, Hagar.
Yeah.
We still have problems because of the Jews and the Arabs. I mean,
And
that's because his
they
sin.
said about Ishmael, he's going to be like a wild ass out there, just in Genesis, pretty strong stuff.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing. So we're still seeing, and I tell you what, it's coming to an end soon, I promise you. Too many things are happening too fast. Jack Van Henry said the other day, and I hadn't thought about it, he said this ISIS, they're a key part of this, and I hadn't thought about
It
it.
ain't heard of a year ago.
Oh, yeah, what, 6 months ago, maybe a year, so we started hearing, look how much ground they've taken.
They're still controllable, we can take them right now, but we got the wrong president.
Absolutely.
And it's written, no, this is written. Just-
Right. Send our special forces guys, we don't have to send a whole army, send it, yeah, yeah. All
They
right,
can be on that all night.
yeah, all right. Anyway, prayer and praise.
Yeah, prayer request for R.C. Sproul. He had a stroke.
Oh, he did?
Yes. R.C. Sproul.
SPROUL.